Good evening and welcome to Summer Cinema with the Mark Morris Dance Group. My name is Colin Fowler. I am the current music director of the Mark Morris Dance Group. That will come into play very soon as to why that's relevant. This summer, we have decided to bring back our popular Video Vault series and rename it as Summer Cinema. This series has featured 2 free on-demand archival collections, each accompanied by a live conversation with dancers and artists connected to each collection. Tonight's conversation is about our second Summer Cinema collection, Dances to Piano Music. It focuses on 3 of Mark Morris's early dances. Canonic Studies in 3/4 time from 1982, with various piano pieces arranged by Harriet Cavalli. Bedtime from 1992, composed of 3 works by Franz Schubert. And Sang-Froid from 2000, set to several piano pieces by Frédéric Chopin. We are streaming full performance videos of these 3 dances played by 3 different music directors who have worked with the Mark Morris Dance Group over the last 40 plus years. Linda Dowdell, Ethan Iverson, and myself. If you have not seen Dances to Piano Music yet, please check it out on our website or YouTube channel. However, know that it will only be available through September 2nd, which is 48 hours from now. There is again bonus content for donors that includes rehearsal video, photos, libretti, and more. So tonight I will be speaking live with 2 former music directors of the Mark Morris Dance Group who are featured in these Dances to Piano Music, as I said, Linda Dowdell and Ethan Iverson. We're going to have a nice, fun, informal conversation, hopefully share some insights and talk about some things that we will enjoy, and we hope that you will too. At the end, we will open it up to your questions, so please feel free to drop any questions you have into the Q&A chat on Zoom. Or if you're joining us via YouTube, just put it directly in the chat, and we have members of our team monitoring those questions who will get those to us, and we'll do our best to get those answered. Enough of the formalities. Please join me in welcoming my colleagues, Linda Dowdell and Ethan Iverson. Good evening.
Colin.
Hi.
It's always anticlimactic to introduce people, and then all that happens is just some boxes pop up. There's no applause. I feel like we should have figured something out a year and a half in now. But anyway, I'm truly thrilled to be able to share this next little time with the 2 of you, learn and glean some insights from you, and hopefully we can share some fun stories in the meantime. So thank you for taking the time to join us. Before we start, I guess maybe just some quick intros might be in order. Linda, if it's okay, let's maybe start with you, a little bit about yourself, how you became connected with Mark Morris, MMDG, et cetera. Just fill us in on a little bit of your background.
Sure. And Colin, thank you so much for hosting tonight. It's really fun to be here with both of you guys and everyone who's with us. I lived in Seattle in the 80s, and right now I live near Seattle, not in Seattle anymore. But while I was living in Seattle, I played for modern dance classes at the University of Washington. And I was playing for someone they had just hired named Aaron Matheson. And he taught a modern dance class at, 8:30 a.m. And so I would play for his class, and occasionally his partner at the time, Mark Morris, would come and take classes. And so that's how I met Mark. And he seemed to enjoy the way I played. And, 4 years went by, and his company was in the area, and they came to hear me perform, especially with Julie Cassiopo, a cabaret singer. And we performed with the Mark Morris Dance Group in Mythologies in New York at the Hammerstein Center. And then when the opportunity to move to Brussels came around, Mark was able to hire a repetiteur, and that became me.
All right. I'm just taking notes now. I'll be sure to recommend that the current company starts taking class at 8:30 a.m. I think
Exactly.
I think everybody will be very enthusiastic about that. So, but
I don't
Ethan.
necessarily recommend it, but but I was there.
Ethan, how about that's more than I can say. Ethan, how about yourself?
Well, it's amazing to see Linda again after all these years, because Linda is why I worked with Mark. my first serious girlfriend and then my first wife was an excellent singer, Karen Goldfader, who was buddies with Linda. And went to see the dance group perform in the early 90s. They were the talk of the town. And I was really basically had fallen off a turnip truck from Menominee, Wisconsin, and was just trying to play jazz or listen to jazz. I had very little connection to European classical music at that time. And I was just thinking, as you introduced us, Colin, that probably the first time I heard an orchestra was going to see the Hard Nut at BAM, 92, 93, something like that. That's probably true. Anyway, my first little bit at college, I studied with someone I know you know, Colin, Justin Della Gioia, who is a great composer, and his father was Norman Della Gioia, who worked for Martha Graham. Diversions of Angels is a famous Graham dance. And I was totally broke, and Justin suggested I start playing for dance classes. And his wife was Marianne Bachman, who worked for Martha Graham. So I started just playing for Graham, and of course she was gone, but I played a lot for Pearl Lang, who, if you're a dance historian, you know that name. And I did play for Cunningham briefly. I played a lot for Janet Soares at Barnard. I was playing for all these dance places in the city. And Linda was a friend of Karen. And I remember for sure one time, Joe Bowie, a famous, important Mark Morris dancer, was at our house with Linda. And I'm like looking at these people like, they're really cool. I wonder what all that's about. And I don't remember the precise thing, but at some point, Linda called me to play for class. And then time moved on, and I started learning more, practicing more, whatever. And then, I mean, I guess Linda tapped me to do over. I remember it was Plate when Mark Morris started.
Yeah. I needed to segue out and move on to other paths. And if you don't mind, Ethan, I'll just segue in here. I somehow felt it was my job to find my replacement. In life, I've learned I don't really need to do that. But anyway, it seemed to me, it's like tricky to find someone. As the three of us know, it's a funny, paint box full of funny skills that we carry. And there weren't, I would know this pianist, but maybe they can't improvise. Maybe this improviser is really not a very good, notation reader, or doesn't like to practice, or, whatever. And I thought, Ethan, yes, I knew you through Karen. And it's funny you mentioned Joe, because both Karen and Joe were in the musical I co-wrote with Kate Brown, The Big Window, which we produced over in Edinburgh during the year of L'Allegro, when there was all L'Allegros going on. I think it was 1994. So yeah.
I don't remember seeing The Big Window, but I did see the Norma.
Right, after, and they were both, well, Karen was in that, yeah.
Yeah, I saw the Norma, and that was Peter Wing Healy.
Right, co-wrote it.
He was a featured part for him, and of course any longtime Morris fan will know that name too.
Yes.
This is the sort of deep and essential early
deep dive,
idiosyncratic geniuses.
I think
the original Madame Stahlbaum for sure. So
my favorite Ethan summarization is that in 1992 I was like, I wonder what this is about, and here we are 30 years later.
Right. Still wondering.
And still going. So, well, Linda, you touched on something as far as the three of us all know very well, and I'm sure some people watching tonight as well, that to be the music director of the Mark Morris Dance Group, I'm sorry to use such a cliche term, but you have to wear many hats. You have to have many different skills. Also, the three of us have been music directors over very different periods of the world. That's a huge generalization, but also in very different periods of the company and very different periods in Mark's life. So I guess my question to each of you, and then I would like to share my thoughts as well, but how how did you view your role as the music director in your time there, and how do you see that has maybe changed as it's gone, as Linda, you said, when you passed the baton to Ethan and so on? Linda, we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, as someone who created the role, I mean, and I guess what you're saying is, and we would all agree, the role continues to change. For me, it did start out playing for classes, and I had played for many classes, like Ethan has mentioned as well. Kazuko Hirabayashi, who was an original Graham dancer, was the first person I played for at Kirkland College in upstate New York. And what she did was say, and then, because that's all she did say. And
very helpful. Very helpful.
Then, so learning from all these different people about that part of the job. And then for me, it was learning 10 suggestions. Again, like going to Brussels and then actually adding rehearsal pianist onto that. And I guess we started working on L'Allegro in Brockport before going to Brussels in 1988. So I began being a rehearsal pianist then, which, as some of you, you may have done too, is also a rehearsal singer often. And I remember that's not Mark complimented me by saying that my, singing of the operatic repertoire, that whatever we were working on, was a little more on the Blossom Dearie side of the tracks. So I take that as a
That's a high compliment, I gotta say.
Yes. So it's probably over the years just moved a little more tenor one range. But anyway, I was rehearsing 10 suggestions in Brussels, learning those pieces, playing for rehearsal, and then giving notes to the person who was going to perform it. And I kind of thought like, maybe this is a little, redundant or something. And may I audition? I really believe my words were. So that's when I became a performer as well. And then eventually I conducted a few pieces as well. And so that was pretty much my role. Didn't include arranging or maybe some other things that have, added on as time went on.
Sure. Ethan, if I can just follow up, Linda was talking about sort of the transition from, both of you have extensive background in playing class. I kind of came at it backwards, being more of a trained classical pianist, never played for a dance class at all until I started working for Mark. And obviously, you have played for many different dance classes for many reputable companies, and then made your way as the music director and started performing. I guess, what kind of difficulties did you find transitioning from playing for class to playing for rehearsal to playing for, the actual show?
Me? No.
Sure,
yeah,
both.
no.
Both. It sounds like that was the progression that you both went on.
Yeah, I don't think I really had the difficulties in those, comparing those various. To me, it was a pretty natural evolution to use, some really normal terminology.
Ethan, how about you?
Well, I was so astoundingly naive in every direction that when I look back on it, I can't even believe I was given the responsibility I was given. I think, to a general point about the history of the Mark Morris Company, I mean, as we've just heard, Linda, wonderful musician. I meant to say this more clearly, but I remember how much I enjoyed seeing the Norma all those years ago. It was great. And Linda's a composer. She played jazz. She did all the stuff with Mark, but she was a buddy of Mark's. And I also got in there sort of on the social side. And in that time with Mark in the 80s and through the 90s, the people that danced for Mark were also sort of idiosyncratic buddies, and that was part of what made Mark at that time. And then in more recent years, everyone's gone to a dance school and can dance with anybody, and there's a lot of great things about that. But those of us who can wear that badge, I was there back when. I think we'd like remembering the fact that we were just a bunch of kooks, really, and certainly I was. And I said before that I'd never heard an orchestra before I heard Mark. I'd never played any classical music in public before. All of a sudden, I was doing on tour for 1,000 people in a rep house, which is just, in retrospect, I just think like, how did they even trust me to do that? But I mean, it worked out for me anyway. It was an incredible learning experience for me, and I think a lot of what I've done since Mark has really been informed by incredible on-the-job experience.
I totally agree. I think as Linda was summarizing and you were eloquently adding to that, Ethan, I think as we were talking about with those I'd say the three main responsibilities of the music director: playing class, playing for rehearsal, and then performing, something that all three of us did for many, many years. For me, the thing that sticks out the most, which is the first thing I did with Mark back in 2006, was playing for rehearsal and getting to watch him make up a dance in real time and follow along with the score and try to figure out where the hell he was. It's like, is he in the exposition, or is he in the recapitulation, or is he moving on from 8 bars, or is he adding something to that? And I totally geeked out and just really loved trying to figure that out and trying to stand, 11 feet away from him and try to watch the wheels and the cog turn. And I'd never been around something like that. And that's what hooked me. And I immediately just was fascinated by the work that he was creating. And then also, as you were alluding to, Ethan, I was like, this guy is really fun to hang out with too. So, and to this day, he's still a very, very close friend of mine, as well as obviously a colleague. So it certainly doesn't hurt one in the job if you get along with the boss / collaborator / friend. So, well, as we've talked about these hats, I want to get a little bit more specific about the dances that we've shown some of the audience in advance tonight, and hopefully dances that they'll get to watch, which are the three that I talked about at the beginning: Bedtime and Sang-Froid and Canonic Studies in 3/4 time. Bedtime and Canons, which is what we call Canonic Studies in 3/4 time, are something that all three of us have played. Ethan and I have played Sang-Froid a handful of times. It was choreographed after Linda stopped working with the company. But Linda, let's start with you. Can you maybe share some insight about Bedtime? Did you play for the rehearsal process of it? If you can sort of take it through, understanding and hoping that most of our audience has also recently watched it or can see it through September 2nd. Plug.
It's 48 hours from now.
I heard that somewhere. I'm not sure where I heard that, but I believe that's
right.
correct. September 2nd.
It's not a long piece, though. It's not a long piece. I think it's a beautiful piece. I mean, I just watched it myself last week in the streaming on the site. And, yes, I did play for all the rehearsals. That was certainly soup to nuts. Bedtime, yes, I was there. I really, one of the wonderful things about it is it's not a solo piano piece. There are voices, which I really loved working with any of the pieces of Mark's, and there were many that had vocal music. So it was a treat to, watch the piece be built. But then it was a super treat to bring in, the voices, in this case being Lorraine Hunt, who we miss desperately. And then the men's choruses, both first in Boston and then in Edinburgh, in terms of, the initial performances. So it's just, the thing I find in looking at the piece again, Mark really did, in his storytelling ability and desire, really spell out the story. It's very, it's a fairy tale, or the last piece, I guess I should say. The third piece, which the three of us talked about a little bit last night, the El König, is such a desperately demanding piece to play. I feel sorry for myself when I think I must have rehearsed that a lot, given the fact that you guys walked.
I feel sorry for your right arm
that
you rehearsed that a lot. My God.
So, but what I love seeing now is the movement. I just feel it's almost archaic, or it reminded me of hieroglyphs, like just these, paintings of people and figures. And anyway, I being so involved in the playing and then working with the vocalists, I don't really think I ever had a clear vision of the piece with the costumes and the lights. You know what I mean? And I'm sure you guys maybe know what I mean. Like, you're so into the piece and its construction. And then when it gets teched and moved on to the stage, you're probably not in a pit, but maybe in a pit. And then there's a little separation. And I really found too that I developed a sixth sense about what was happening on stage, because you can't get that involved. You need to be involved in case something goes wrong or something has to adjust. But I don't feel like it's actual detail. I feel like it's very impressionistic, or I did anyway. So my impression of Bedtime, it was interesting to kind of get back to what my impressions, and then to actually see it as an audience member given on a screen was a wonderful treat. I really enjoyed it.
Just a little background for those that don't know: the third and final of the three Schubert pieces is Erlkönig, which is about a poem about a child who is killed or assaulted by a king of fairies. So it's very tormented. The dance represents that, and the Schubert took that out on the pianist's right hand by having endlessly repeating eighth notes in octaves, literally da 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 for about 2.5 minutes, which is just endless. And so it's not so much the child that is being killed, but it's like right arm being killed by carpal tunnel syndrome. So it's a very, very challenging piece that even we were talking a little bit, and other pianists, about like, how do you cheat? How do you get both hands to do it when the left hand isn't occupied? And we all had different techniques of getting all of those notes that Schubert torturously wrote in for us. But it's satisfying when you're done, but my God, you got to be careful practicing.
Yeah.
So Ethan, did you have any particular memories of performing Bedtime other than constant right hand massage?
Well, I enjoyed watching it on video. I don't think we've said it so far today, but we should definitely say that, Mark Morris really understands music. He really does. And I think all musicians love Mark Morris choreography. I often used to think, like, what can I do to get my musician friends to come to a dance show, which they would never do. They just wouldn't go to a dance show. And I thought, you don't get it. It's actually going to a music show, because it's incredible. Yeah, I just wept when I watched Bedtime again, and I wept for all three. It's the blend of storytelling plus some really deep connection to the harmonic movement of the music. It's very, very powerful. Yeah.
So speaking of powerful, and I couldn't agree more on Mark's connection to music. He is a musician first and a choreographer second, I often say. But Sang-Froid, a collection of, I believe, 9-10 Chopin pieces, all solo piano. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Ethan? Did you play for the creation of that, or?
Yeah, well, there's a tradition of Chopin dances, right? And so I think there's a I can't pronounce it. Sylvides or
Sylvide.
Sylvide, yeah.
Sylvide. Sylvide.
Well,
I'm just going to keep saying the wrong word.
Nobody can.
Glad I'm not the only one having problem pronouncing that. But yeah, so there's a tradition of Chopin dances in ballet, and that's probably true of a lot of things Mark does. There's some sort of tradition that he'll look at from a different perspective. And the choreography of Sang-Froid it's his language, which among other things, it's humorous. I would say I was laughing out loud watching it again and thinking of how different it would be from any ballet Chopin. This is sort of like a down and dirty, fucked up gamesmanship kind of weird thing, to do to Chopin, but it really works because it's Mark's aesthetic is so strong. Yeah, I didn't really grow up playing classical piano. I'm now sort of, among my peers, I think people think of Ethan as the classical guy, and they're not wrong. Maybe I am the classical guy, but I got that way playing for Mark. And I guess Sang-Froid was really the final boss. If you're playing the video game of trying to level up your piano chops, then
that you better get Princess Peach at the end of that. My God, that's.
Yeah, when I watched that, I really didn't want to watch it because I thought I definitely couldn't play it. But then I watched and I was like, well, I guess I was 29. I guess when you're that, like, I did have some kind of, you just do it. There's things I'm doing in that I don't even think I could do now, but I just did it because I had to do it, and I was young and dumb, and I believed in Mark, and I loved everybody in the company at that moment. I was in love with every dancer, and I was just like, okay, I'm going down with the ship in this. That's fine, And it, but I think, Colin, since you played it, you know that it starts with. This is a piece professionals don't play. Opus 10, number 2, right?
No. I mean, it's not all etudes. It has some nocturnes and my most famous, his only Berceuse in D flat, which is just maybe the greatest piece ever, depending on the day. But yeah, no, these are etudes. These are truly studies. These are like things that you do in the darkness of your own home so that you can leave and then do something easier. And people are like, wow, you know what you're doing. As opposed to sit down and listen to me do this for 22 minutes. They're very, very difficult. And it's nicely bookended with 2 of the hardest pieces, in my opinion, that Chopin wrote, those 2.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah.
I would say this is it's a bring up the theme of like how the position has changed. I know you play Mozart dances, and you play all 3 movements on tour, right? So like that's really like you really play the repertoire. You and like I won't speak for Linda, but I can't do that. I can't step in and play 3 Mozart concertos in a night.
No.
It's not going to happen. You can do that, and I would say that Sang-Froid is probably the moment where you can see the repertoire change from pieces like canons and grand duo and 10 suggestions and other stuff, which is for pianists they're good musicians, but they're not virtuosos necessarily. And Sang-Froid is like, that's a different kettle of fish. So I would say that everything I played for Mark before that wasn't so hard. Not really, not by that standard.
Well, I certainly can't argue that Sang-Froid is a different kettle of fish. That is that takes a lot of time.
Well, a lot of things you've had to play. You play the Hummel, you play the Mozart concertos. Even Italian concerto by Bach, Barber excursions. I mean, this is rigorous piano music, and that goes hand in hand with the way the dancers have changed. The dance, Mark's dances. He says there's the old style and there's a new style. The old style was Harry Parch and Peter Wing Healy. It was really idiosyncratic, and now it's a different thing. And people change and it does evolve. They're both great.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. To touch on all those levels of difficulty. Yeah, the Hummel, the festival dance, the dance you're referring to, the Hummel Fifth Trio, was probably the hardest. It's one of the hardest pieces I've had to play. It's just technically relentless. But I would not put canons too far down that list. So again, I hope that you watching have been able to watch this piece officially canonic studies in 3/4 time. The original study I think was canonic waltz studies, but not all of them are officially waltzes. So it's canonic studies in 3/4 time. I did learn, as I'd forgotten, that Mark choreographed it in a workshop in Seattle, but he was about to choreograph new love song waltzes 15 pieces of Brahms, also something that the three of us have all played and performed, and I absolutely love. But it was sort of done to prepare and sort of get that meter in his head, which is also why they've never been performed on the same program, which I actually had forgotten about. But it was put together with Harriet Cavalli, who is maybe the greatest class pianist, no offense to the two people on this call, who ever lived. And she was playing for classes with Mark. And these were some of the favorite pieces that she played in class when he was teaching a workshop. And she was a fabulous pianist. And so they sort of chose some of these, some of Mark's favorites, I'm sure some of Harriet's favorites, and she kind of arranged them and put them together. All that being said, what's especially hard about it is, again, similar to Sang-Froid, these are etudes. These are like meant to be technically challenging and not necessarily performed. In fact, some of them are just impossible. You just go for as much as you can get and hope that enough paint sticks on the wall that you can see it. So it's, I can certainly say I've never played this piece the same way twice, because the accuracy of getting all those notes, or how I'm feeling, I'm going to go for something a little bit more. But you definitely see Mark's humor and understanding of both music and the appreciation of dance, and how he can turn basically music for a dance class, costumes for a dance class, and some moves principally from a dance class, and turn it into an incredibly popular, very entertaining, very challenging for the dancers and the musician piece, is really a testament. He made it up in 5 days. And actually, I also recently found out the first movement, which is a solo, he apparently added right before they opened. So that was a last minute addition, which I did not know. But if anybody wants to know, email me. I can show you some of the score. It's a complete shit show as far as a score goes. If you want to go to the text, you should go somewhere else. And if you don't know what text is, look it up and you will not find this score at all. So there's literally notes in it, like, do what you can. And of course, my favorite movement is one that involves hitting a hotel bell. So again, if you haven't seen it, check it out. So do you guys have any memories, nightmares, something in between from playing canons? Or shall we not talk about this?
Yeah. I
Any
think
PTSD?
Just the general comment you said of, like, it's kind of like, well, as you said, it's etude. So you're kind of certainly going to be better than you at the end than you were at the beginning. That's the good news.
Yeah.
Well, I don't disagree with what you're saying, Colin, but when I first worked on that, they gave me a video of Harriet playing it. And, it's a style, it's a way of life, that kind of dance class piano playing. It's really, and I would say it's closer to stride piano or something where it's just pure rhythm. So I mean, I actually, I'm not saying it's not difficult, but I regard that more like, if you could just have fun with it, it would work out. And, you could rescore things. I mean, you talk about rescoring the Schubert, but I don't know how much I really rescored of that, but I definitely rescored some of Canon's, just because it's clearly didn't matter. And in fact, that's part of being a dance class pianist, is sort of making it work in class at that day. The bell on that makes me think of another piece that all three of us have played, is Grand Duo, which has a octave bar. This is sort of, again, old Morris. I mean, this stuff probably still happens, but back in the day, the piano players, it wasn't enough to play the piano. You had to play a bell, you had to play an octave banger, you had to do all that stuff. Linda, tell us about the first time you were confronted with the octave banger for Grand Duo.
Well, and because, Grand Duo has several movements, polka, the last one, being the first one that was created. So that was, its own standalone piece. And it just was so wonderful, because it just was so energetic, both from the music and the choreography that came about. And we were talking about the octave banger yesterday, and I do have two of them, and I'm guessing maybe one is the original. It's not for both hands, although, yeah. And they're very primitive. You know, I see staples, I see felt, I see duct tape. And it's not ebony as far as I know, probably pine or something. But yeah, I was always so worried I would lose one. You know, that's probably why I have. That's probably why I still have two. Yeah, it would make me nervous to, you know, the couple of measures leading up to picking it up, right? And like, where did it go? You know, was it on the music stand part, or was it on the little, you know, out here, or yeah, and then to put it down in the right place, you know, etc. So
okay, so two things. I'm going to interrupt you real quick, and then
sure.
I have a question. One, so that we can keep airing this and publish this on YouTube and not Pornhub, I'm going to take a quick second and talk about what an octave banger is. An octave banger is that little piece of wood with felt on it that Linda was holding up, but it's designed to hit all of the notes on a piano within an octave, either all all 8 of the white keys or all 6 of the black keys. And Lou Harrison, who composed Grand Duo, literally says, pick up octave bar, or we call it an octave banger, writes the notes with an octave with a line through it. And that's when you get the clusters. That's what we call an octave banger. My question to the two of you, which is a serious one, where do you put it? Because this has been a problem for me for like 15 years. Where did you put it? Because there's moments when you have to put it down very quickly in the middle of Stampede and in Polka.
Exactly. I think, as I recall, you know, probably on the ledge, right, where the music is, like, but wherever it's going to be about to be played, and then put it down at the next location, you know what I mean? So maybe that's higher. But yeah, you don't want to mess around with that, because it won't be in the right place when you go to pick it up.
Ethan, did you have a secret compartment?
I'm sure you did.
Well, you know, I don't remember that. I mean, I don't want to be Olympian about this, but I don't remember that being a particular problem. I think I always liked it because I knew I wasn't going to play any wrong notes in that section. Like no one would know. I always thought it was an arsenal. You know, in what's the second movement? Stampede? Is that it?
Stampede.
That's when it appears, right?
Yeah.
I always loved that moment when I got to bust it out for the first time, because I knew it would really sound like World War III going off. I do have two little anecdotes about it. One is just that I played it with Mark and the company at the Kennedy Center Honors, which was a sort of gala event with Clint Eastwood and all these people. And Herbie Hancock was there. And Herbie asked me about the octave bar. So I pulled it out of my, you know, jacket and showed Herbie. He was like, I was wondering what that was. So anyway, that was just for the record. I had a little interaction with Herbie Hancock around the octave bar. And then the next thing is I interviewed Keith Jarrett, who is another advocate of Lou Harrison, just like Mark Morris. And in fact, you could almost say that those are the top two advocates for Lou Harrison, is Mark and Keith. And Keith commissioned a concerto from Lou, and he told him not to make it too strenuous. And Keith he sort of felt that the octave banger was sort of like a return serve on that. Like, all right, you weak piano player, here, I'll give you some ammunition or something like that. So Keith did it, but I think he was a little disappointed, and he wanted to play it. But Keith does play it well. That's a good record. But anyway, it's the pianists of the world know about this unique item Lou Harrison gave to the instrument. Yeah.
I also had the privilege of playing his organ concerto for organ and percussion at the Ojai Festival, which uses both a single octave and a double octave banger. What? Special shout out to Johann Hankins for building a double octave banger. So, however, while we're on this note of anecdotes, I want to get to a few user questions, but I also I'm sure we all have years, decades of experience working with the incredible Mark Morris Dance Group, the incredible Mark Morris, playing incredible pieces of music with incredible musicians. How many times can I use the word incredible? I'm done for now. But surely there's got to be some interesting stories, funny stories, ridiculous stories, maybe even embarrassing, hopefully, stories. I'll take care of that one, I promise. That maybe have happened over the last 40 years that either of you might want to share.
Well, one thing, Colin, that I thought of, that this is partly, it's not much of a story really, but it's just something that happened. One of the pieces I conducted was called Lucky Charms, and it's the music of Jacques Ibert, and it's tricky. I remember we were performing it in Berkeley, and this is, again, with my stories, we have to go back several decades. So this is before smartphones, for example, and things like that. So I'm conducting, I think it was 11 musicians or something like that. And as we're going, playing, it's a really great piece. Love I really like it, both musically. And so and I think there's only one trumpet, probably. It was a Sunday afternoon. There was an important sports game going on in California. I know. And suddenly somebody, I don't know how this happened or how it came to my attention, the trumpet player had a small TV by her stand and was like watching it when she wasn't playing and like keeping track of innings, or I don't know what sport it was. And I never, as a conductor or any kind of, leading small ensembles, I thought, what is my role here? And there really wasn't time to even think about that. So anyhow, that's sort of the end of that story. I don't know if anyone ever, got in trouble, or I know management found out about it, MMDG management, but I don't remember what happened. And I'm sure it was our last show there for that season.
Well,
Crazy.
The question is, did Cal win the football game?
I know.
Is the question.
And then my other question is, well, do players do that all the time now? Because you could just have that on your phone. Like this was actually a television. So the world is different now. Yeah.
Ethan, anything?
Well, yeah, it's a great question. And there's one thing I did, which in retrospect, I feel was incredibly unprofessional, but you're young and dumb, and somehow it was not. I worked with Yo-Yo Ma before Mark Morris. I actually had done a couple of tango gigs with him, so I must have felt pretty comfortable around Yo-Yo, and I noticed that he never tuned. He had a thing. He's anyone who knows Mr. Ma knows that he's incredibly good with the public. He's also one of the greatest musicians of all time. But man, this guy can like look so comfortable with everybody, and he's just hanging out, and like the music just flows out of his cello. And he never tunes. He never was tuning the cello. And every other string player I was around with would be like, they're constantly tuning. In fact, I a little bit of a pet peeve with certain MMDG musicians is how much they're tuning. I'm like, why do you have to tune that much? It's like,
says the three
tuning.
Pianists.
I know, right?
It's like, you got to stop tuning at some point. I mean, you're tuning but anyway, that aside, which is not very fair to the great string players I worked with, Yo-Yo never tuned that I could see. And then finally I was watching him, and he would be talking to people, and he'd be fiddling with the fine tuning thing. He'd be clink, clink, and he'd mastered that. So when we were on tour, he'd play the solo Bach piece first, the dance falling downstairs. And then the second piece would be the argument, which was to Robert Schumann music. And I got in this thing where I wouldn't give him a tuning note, because he wouldn't ask for one. I noticed that I'd just be playing the piano a little bit, and he'd be fooling with the cello, and then he'd play in tune. And I sort of started to like play a weird game of chicken with him, where I wanted to see if he would ever ask for a tuning note. And he didn't. And then one night it was really out of tune. There's some double stops in the one of the movements. You can't really, I mean, he could sort of play in tune no matter where he was for most of the things, but some of those double stops with open strings, and it was pretty out of tune. I sort of woke up and I'm like, what am I doing? Like trying to force this issue. 3,000 people in the house, and I'm like playing this weird game of, are you going to tune the cello, Yo-Yo Ma? Anyway, so that's my embarrassing story.
So you only exclusively warmed up in E flat minor, I assume? Just you're not getting any A. There's not going to be anything in here.
But the thing is, his ears are so good, you could play any note on the piano and he would adjust. It was his fine tuning. I mean, that was sort of his mastery of the domain. You know, I just wouldn't touch the instrument. Anyway, sorry, Yo-Yo. I hope you're not watching this. So a quick story. I promised something embarrassing, so I won't disappoint. But the company went on to 2 brief stories. The company went on a 6.5-week tour of the UK about 10 years ago, and did performances in all 12 different cities, and we did grand duo a bunch. But the point is that I didn't want to dry clean my slacks in towns all over the UK. And I've been hanging out with the company enough, and hanging out with Mark, who goes to India a lot, and we'd be in hotel rooms with dancers and people after a show. And, Mark would wear a sarong or a dhoti or a lungi, some sort of an Indian style wrap. And it was like, boy, I wish I could pull that off. That looks really comfortable. And he was like, no, you should. And so he brought me back one from India, and it was like, wow, this is amazing. So my girlfriend at the time with the company wore them, and it was like, wow, yeah, I mean, women wear them at the beach, but men in this country just don't wear them. But I was like, you know what? I could perform in this. It looks nice. I just wear a black button down, wear a black sarong, whatever. And then I don't have to do dry cleaning, which is great. So I took it for the tour for 6 weeks in the UK. Never looked back. Been performing with it ever since for 14 years. However, the last show of that, we did grand duo in Maltings, and we'd been there for 6 weeks. Everybody was ready to go home. And that last octave banger note on polka, which I had gotten permission from Mark to actually use my left arm just to make it more of an emphatic ending, I hit it so hard that I actually knocked over the piano bench and almost fell backwards, thus losing my dress. I didn't, which was good. The thing is that underneath my dress was nothing. So that was a close call. Fast forward a few years, the premiere of Sang-Froid, a piece by Eric Satie for tenor and piano, a premiere, one of Mark's most famous dances from that decade, beautiful dance. Since it was a world premiere, the musicians go up on stage. The tenor was a very famous French tenor, Jean-Paul Fouché. He and I got along great. We walked backstage at the end of the show. Mark goes on, bows, comes to bring us on. Jean-Paul gives me a big hug. And then when he turns, he steps on my sarong, which again, not belted in, just tied in very tightly, but not designed for a human to step on it with their feet and then turn and start walking the other way. Thus, the knot came pretty much undone. I'm about to walk on stage of the Gilman Opera House at BAM with a few thousand people out there, really excited about the end of this show, and the Mark Morris Dance Group behind me. And I realized I'm going to lose it. It's going to fall off. And again, in case that wasn't clear, there's nothing underneath. So there's something underneath, but you know what I mean. And so I had no choice. I was like literally holding on to it. Mark is like going to grab my hand, and I'm like, nope, no. I'm going to bow just like this, and I'm just going to hold my business together. And I did. And I've since adjusted the way I tie it, and sometimes wear a little something underneath. But you live and you learn. So far, still batting 1,000. So I feel good about that. So anyway. At this point, we have a little bit of time left. I'm not sure how one segues from that, so therefore I'm not going to. I'm just going to jump right into a few other questions from some of our online viewers. Someone from Zoom has asked, what were your favorite and least favorite pieces to play? I know we sort of talked about a little bit of that, but any pieces that stood out that you particularly enjoyed playing for more than others, or vice versa?
I was thinking about that, and I so enjoyed playing the Brahms, both sets, anytime I could. Again, partly because of the voices, but also because there's so many sections. I mean, so many of Mark's pieces are many sections. And, but there's a lot. What did you say, 15 and 18, right? And to have just the relationships of those tempos and moods, and jump from that one to that one. I mean, I just loved that challenge. I also really liked Rhymes with Silver, which I was there for the creation of that as well. And that was such an unusual piece and experience. And I couldn't really think of one I didn't like, except I didn't like, another part of the musical director job that we haven't really mentioned too much is a diplomacy job of counsel, if there are other conductors involved, conductor counseling. And, if anybody wants to be a conductor, they do really, one of the things they don't want to be, well, they're not that interested in other people's ideas. So to do that job really well is definitely, I felt, diplomatic. And so the gamelan piece, World Power, I really didn't understand the score of that sufficiently because I don't quite, the gamelan is such a mystery to me. I never really enjoyed talking about it. So that was one thing that did occur to me as I walked down memory lane. I liked the piece.
Rhymes with Silver is on my bucket list for sure. That's definitely a piece I've never got the thrill to get to play or even see live, but here's hoping it comes back. Ethan, I'm sorry to interrupt.
I don't have to preserve my job with Mark Morris anymore, I don't think. But there was one piece I didn't like musically, and I didn't like playing the piano part too much either. It was early on. It was something by John Harbison. I don't remember what the piece was called. I mean, the music was, but it was the dance ended up being called Medium, and it was bits of Schubert plus Harbison's own language. And I like Harbison as a composer, but I just found the score incredibly blocky. And I also thought, are you really gonna write new music around Schubert? Dance was probably a great, but whatever. I remember that's the only thing I was worked with where I felt the music was not up to snuff, shall we say, in terms of my own taste. I guess I do have, in terms of getting to play something, I played the Schumann Piano Quintet, the Dance V, and again, I came from a jazz background. I'd never done any of this stuff, so to play 40 minutes of long form chamber music was really, essentially, that's the closest I would ever get to playing a symphony. That kind of grand sonata form statement and this big arcs, and I loved it. I wish that all jazz pianists, my peers, they could get a chance to do that, to experience compositional logic over this, someone like Schumann in control of this narrative for 40 minutes. It's probably not 40 minutes. How long is it, Colin?
It's about 28, 30.
Okay, all right.
The Trout is 40, yeah.
So sorry, 30 minutes. Yeah. Anyways, definitely the pieces I've ever played, that's among the longest in terms of a sustained thought, quite like that. And there is maybe one more anecdote, because relating to what Linda's saying, being a diplomat is part of the job. And what makes it hard is that Mark's the authority, because the dance is the music. You got some divas up there sometimes, these singers or these the players, they want to play it their way. They don't want to play it for the dance. And the three of us know, we were there, we saw it in the rehearsal, we understand what's going on. We're like, no, the dance drives the bus. We got to play it for the dance. But not everyone in the pit is going to understand that. At the same time, I think there's real potential for the music to have a life of its own because it's dictated by the dance. And also you get to do it so often. There's that Bartók string quartet, all fours, and the good musicians in that band, but like, how often do you get to play a Bartók string quartet 60 or 70 times? I mean, it's beautiful the way you get to polish an interpretation. And so my little anecdote about this playing V is that we were in Philadelphia and Sir Simon Rattle was in the audience. And he came backstage to say hi to Mark, and Mark hadn't emerged yet. And then he's standing next to me. And he looks at me and he has to say something, right? You know, he can't not say something to me. And he's a nice guy. He's going to say something nice. But he said, you know, nice rubato in the Schumann is what he said to me. And I'm thinking, okay, all right. Well, you can't take that away from me, even though he was probably just blowing smoke. You know, Sir Simon Rattle just complimented my rubato and Robert Schumann. So that's the kind of extraordinary experience I got to have with Mark quite often in a way. But I do think, you know, my own little ego moment aside, for all of us, I'm sure we know that we got to explore this music through the prism of dance and Mark's musicality that would show us something about this music. Because Sir Simon wasn't really complimenting my rubato. He was complimenting the way the music and the dance went together, which is the special thing about Mark and music. And I mean, how many modern dance companies have a music director?
Right.
True. Yeah. Well, I think the follow-up question is how many dance companies have a artistic director who is so musical,
right,
as well. So, and I think just to follow up on what you're saying, and also to sort of a way to wrap this all up, is, as you were saying, we work with some incredible musicians. There I am using the word incredible again, but and orchestras and singers and conductors, and obviously working with the incredible dancers of the Mark Morris Dance Group throughout the 40-year history. But the unifying thing is, Mark, when I've conducted orchestras for Mark, the musicians love working for him. And it's important that they know that Mark and I see eye to eye, and he and I talk, and so that I know his vision and he knows mine. And he's an excellent collaborator. He's not a dictator when it comes to musical ideas. He'll listen. There are some things that have to be dictated for the dance, but in general, musical interpretation, that's why he uses live music. It should be different every time. We're human beings. We should embrace that. The dancers embrace that. Everybody thrives on that. And this is what we get to do together. And hopefully we can do that more and more together in theaters soon. But it starts from Mark and all the musicians and the conductors and the dancers and the singers. And if everyone buys into that, it just makes for an even more powerful performance. And I think is one of the great things about Mark's legacy. So, on that note, I think I'm going to wrap it up. There are a few questions that are still floating out there, but I also want to be good with time here. So if you have any questions that you didn't get answered, please feel free to email info@mmdg.org and we will get those answered for you. First and foremost, I want to thank Linda and Ethan for joining us tonight. It's been so wonderful to spend this hour with you guys. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your insight and knowledge and experiences over these last decades with Mark and the dance group. We also want to thank everybody who has made it possible to continue to create live and live stream programming over the year, donors big and small. A heartfelt thank you to Bloomberg Philanthropies. Don't mispronounce the sponsor. I'll make a note of that for next time. And also within the Mark Morris team, especially the artistic team, the development team, and also the MMDG archivist, Steph Neal, who did a lot of work in just helping put this together, make sure we're all prepared. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you again, Linda, Ethan. It has truly been a pleasure. And also, please stay for the credits so you can help acknowledge all the people that I didn't just mention, so you can see all the incredible people that work so hard to put all of this content and more together. Thank you all. Stay safe. Thank you, Linda and Ethan. Good night.
Thank you, Colin.